Welcome to Agile to Agility podcast with Miljan, Bajic.
Major show alert!
The very first value we wrote is individuals and interactions.
Let's take this another level.
And if you're happy and optimistic, you are more resilient to problems, so you work better. So actually the bottom line in every organization is improved if people laugh every day.
So who is Aino Corry? What's your journey? How did you get into this Agile world? How did you learn about the Agile? Maybe you can start with that.
Well, I sort of stumbled upon the Agile. So to try to make, it's difficult to make that journey short. So I always wanted to be a teacher in mathematics because I thought the world needed better teachers in mathematics, right? So I wanted to be a teacher in primary and secondary school. But then I hated to be in primary and secondary school myself. So I thought maybe I should be a high school teacher instead. So I started at the university to become a high school teacher in mathematics. But then I had to learn programming as part of the mathematics course. That was the beginning of the 90s. And I didn't know what programming was. I didn't have a computer, but I really liked it. Really liked programming. It's very, very interesting and satisfying to program.
Mm-hmm.
So I ended up doing the master's in computer science and the minor in maths for teaching in high school. And then when I finished my master's thesis, I really wanted to continue working on what I was working on, which was design patterns and language constructs in object-oriented languages. So I started a PhD to continue to work on that. And I finished my PhD and I thought that I wanted to be a university teacher in computer science. And I already started teaching at the university. But then I was headhunted to industry. And it just happened to be a company in Denmark, a small company called EOS, that's now Trifork, that worked together with Kent Beck on extreme programming, right in the beginning of extreme programming. And they made these special tables for pair programming and things like that. So you could say from day one, when I came out in industry and started as a developer, it was just Agile development. I never really tried anything else. That being said, the first course I taught was actually in RUP, the Rational Unified Process, which is definitely not Agile. So I taught that without ever having tried that, with only ever having tried Agile. So that was weird. But that's how I stumbled upon Agile. And then I was working on different things like development and inviting speakers to conferences and teaching object-oriented analysis and design and Java programming, software architecture, design patterns. And yeah, then I saw a presentation with Linda Rising about retrospectives and I liked that. And then I focused on that. I guess that's my journey.
Nice. So what do you think? I mean, like, what you just mentioned about maybe some of the aspects of extreme programming, even today, like kids are learning and it's pretty, in a sense, natural for them, right? But when we, look at, back 10, 15, 20 years ago, that wasn't the case. So what are some of the things when you work with developers, like how should developers be working in a sense? Like, well, maybe the question is not how, but what do you see, like this divide maybe between the younger generations of where, like, you assume you're a full stack developer, right? Versus, what we see with older generations is maybe like I'm a specialist in this specific application for a backend piece of it.
Yeah. So
how do we get these to align?
It's not easy, is it? Because previously it was all about being a specialist and having that job security and you being the one who knows how to change this system, right? This legacy software is yours. And whenever there's any support needed, it's your job, right? So it's job security for you. Some people thought like that. And then come these new waves and I sort of zoom into a company and I talk about truck numbers and I talk about pair programming and maybe even mob programming, and they're like, "Ew, it's such a waste of time. It's better if the expert just does this." But then the expert is sick for 2 weeks or on vacation, and then we're sort of in a problem. So I think it's definitely something that people have to learn, that sharing knowledge and learning and getting the truck number down is really important for the long run. I understand that in the short run, if you look like 1 month or 2 months ahead, it's pretty obvious that it's really convenient to have somebody who can just code this with the experience that they have. But there are two major problems with that. One problem is that, what about the novices? What about the newcomers? How are they supposed to learn if you sort of keep it tight to yourself? And the second problem is also, well, what if you're wrong, right? What if the beautiful thing that you've made actually is flawed? Maybe you should have somebody to look at it. Maybe somebody could make some tests that could reveal something you never thought about. But I guess that's part of the problem. That what if it turns out that one of the things that I've made isn't really 100% perfect, so maybe I don't want people to look at it. So it's definitely clashing. But I have to say, it's not just the young and the old. Yeah. It's also something about personality. I definitely see some of the young novices in this field who do not want to do pair programming because they think it's better if I just have this on my own. I own this software and I just work on this. So that shared ownership of software with extreme programming is kind of difficult to explain. And I think especially to newcomers, because they haven't felt the pain of the problems that can come out of being siloed is the problem.
But it's also maybe like, like at least my experience has been like people are resistant until they try it. And they a lot of times change their opinion about either pair programming, especially mob programming. Like it's just for a lot of people, it's just that's like doesn't make any sense. This is crazy. Yeah. So have you seen that too, where it's like
yeah, definitely. So I always try to introduce mob programming. I mean, pair programming is what people mostly know, but mob programming, I think it's so productive and it's so interesting. And I always try to introduce it to the companies that I'm a consultant for. And in the beginning, it's always like, people who are not developers should actually touch the keyboard, really? I mean, shouldn't I be the only one who is programming here? So they don't really, in the beginning, they don't get the point, and they don't think it's a good idea that everybody, maybe we should explain mob programming. Everybody is in the same room looking at the same screen, only having one keyboard, and they share the keyboard, and everybody has 7 to 10 minutes at the keyboard, even those who don't program normally. And when you're at the keyboard, you don't have to do any thinking. The crowd around you should tell you what to do and help you through it. So even if you don't know how to do this, you can just relax because people will tell you how to do it, and even how to make those weird symbols on your keyboard. You don't have to think about that. So people are worried that it'll be a waste of time. But I have to say that in the places where I've introduced mob programming and I said, let's just try it out. It's not, we don't have to change the way you're working, but let's just try it out as an experiment. Mostly they've liked it. Of course, I've had some teams who just didn't like it. And also if they chose, okay, we got this list of bugs we need to debug, that's great for mob programming, we can get that done. No, that's not really the point. I mean, it's better if you have a new feature you want to develop or an idea you want to try, it's much better for that. So if you can make people try it out on a new feature or something that gives value to the users, that will give you the most feedback, the most positive feedback as a start. So take that as an experiment. And then once they try it, they notice this is actually brilliant. It's fun. And you don't have to wait for the architect to answer. You don't have to wait for the data analyst. You don't have to wait for the UX or the UI person. They're just in the room. So all that waiting for each other, you just eliminate that and you can just work together. So once they notice that, then normally they like it. So what's your experience, Miljan, about this?
Well, it's just in general, like that as a coach, right? And trying to help teams understand, like, because a lot of times people confuse being busy with getting stuff done, right?
Oh yes.
And a lot of times it's just when you expose the whole kind of system to itself, or the whole end-to-end process, people start realizing, oh, holy crap, this is not what I was thinking. And as you know, in Agile and Scrum, we look at it from a customer perspective. So I think when people see in the quality perspective, when we see people either pairing, it's about learning, it's about being vulnerable, right? Trusting each other.
Yeah.
That really, a lot of times it's about that trust and creating a team rather than just group of people or individuals that do their own job
Yeah.
within that team. So that's been my experience in the sense of just how powerful it is when it
Mhm.
comes to developing, teams that actually like working with each other, and they're looking forward to peer program with
Yeah.
another person because they know they'll learn.
Yes,
Um,
exactly. Yeah.
yeah,
But it's sort of a circle, right? Because you learn to trust each other by doing pair programming and mob programming, but you can't really start doing pair programming or mob programming before you have a certain level of trust, right? So
mhm,
it's a circle like that. But once you get the circle started, it really evolves.
mhm. And it's also like if you think about it from a vulnerability standpoint, right? A lot of times we talk about how do you develop trust, and it's being vulnerable. So
Mm,
if you have if you're a junior guy and you have a senior developer, or maybe you're both senior, but you don't want to expose it, and you're gonna say, all of my things, maybe, I'll look bad, whatever it is, right? There's some
mm,
fear, and actually letting go of that fear and just, sitting down with somebody and sharing and exposing, in a sense, like how you do things, or how you, whatever your opinions are on certain things, or how you solve that problem, can help with that
yeah,
trust.
definitely.
Um, you've written a book on agile retrospectives anti-patterns. How
Yeah.
did you get into, there we go. How did you get into facilitation? Because obviously
Well,
one big part of retrospectives is facilitation.
yeah, it is. Well, it was, I guess I always facilitated a little bit because I'm an
Mhm,
older sister in the family of a lot of people, right? So I guess that facilitation was sort of inbred with my childhood,
mhm.
and mediating and things like that. But the retrospectives part came with a presentation by Linda Rising that I watched in Denmark many years ago. And she brought this book by Noam Kurth called Project Retrospectives. And she gave me that book, and I just read it cover to cover, and it was really inspiring. And I thought, wow, can you do something like that? Can you actually make people share and appreciate each other and learn and come up with small changes for the good of the team? And I started facilitating retrospectives, and then Diana Larsen and Esther Darby's book came out about agile
Yeah.
retrospectives. Then I started doing those
Yeah.
shorter retrospectives, and I took a course with Diana Larsen, and later um, taught the course with her. So I just made more and more retrospectives, and I just got really excited about the retrospective structure, that you have set aside time for reflection in a team in order to find something that you together can help improve the team. Instead of finding a scapegoat on the faults, you try to figure out how can we improve as a team. And I think that it's team building, and it's fun, and it's really important, and it's strengthening for a team to do these retrospectives. It's really important, and I've seen so many retrospectives really help people. I've also seen a lot of retrospectives go really bad, which is my book is called Retrospectives Anti-Patterns, because it's how can it go wrong?
Yeah, so maybe, yeah, exactly. And I think, in a sense, like the retrospectives are the core of lean thinking, which it's like, how do we get better? How do we, relentlessly improve?
Mhm.
And a lot of times there's not that buying from the whole team, right? In the sense of, some of the anti-patterns that you've described are exactly that. So maybe we can look a couple of, or some of those anti-patterns. Could you maybe talk about the prime directive ignorance
Yes.
anti-pattern and share with
I
us
hope,
what is that anti-pattern?
I hope you choose that. So the prime directive ignorance is, we go back to the original book by Noam Kurth, Project Retrospectives, where he wrote the prime directive for retrospectives, which is a long text basically saying, remember, everybody did the best they could. And it's that mindset that's so important to bring to a retrospective, but it's difficult. So you have to think when you enter a retrospective, okay, we know that in this team, in this sprint, in this project, some things have not gone as good as we hoped for. And some people maybe have made mistakes or have blundered or have forgot to do something. But what we need to figure out now is, why did this happen? And how can we support everybody in the team so that it doesn't happen again? But the problem is that we're sort of brought up with finding a scapegoat. Like when we were children, our parents would ask, who started that fight? Who broke that vase? And things like that. So we brought up with trying to figure out, who is the culprit here? Who can we attack and put into jail or something like that, instead of trying to figure out, what's the problem here? How can we change the way this team works together? And the prime directive ignorance is because when you enter a retrospective, you're supposed to, as a facilitator, really and truly believe that everybody did the best they could, but also impart to the team, remember that you have to have the mindset that everybody truly did the best they could. But then there are some people who will say, I don't think everybody did the best they could. I mean, somebody were lazy, somebody slacked. And I know that even myself, I don't do the best I can always. So it's about having the courage as a facilitator to say, when we enter this retrospective, you should strive to have that mindset that everybody did the best they could. Because if we don't have that mindset, we're trying to subconsciously find the scapegoat and find the one that needs to be punished. And that can be maybe fulfilling for you, but it's not very constructive for the team in the long run. What's constructive for the team in the long run is trying to figure out, how can we support this person or these people so that this will be better in the long run? And that prime directive ignorance anti-pattern is that the facilitator chooses to ignore the prime directive and not talk to the team about it before they start the retrospective. And in all my anti-patterns, there's a refactored solution. And the refactored solution here is, bring the prime directive to each retrospective. Either you have it on a board if it's in real life, or if it's online, then write it in the email, or at least say it at the beginning of the retrospective. Remember, we're not trying to find a scapegoat. We're trying to improve the system, which is us.
Exactly. Along those lines too, one of the things, at least I experience with Scrum Masters or facilitators, is that they're not familiar with the role of neutrality in facilitation. Are you familiar with that? What are your thoughts?
Can you say that again?
Being the role, like in a sense, being neutral when you're facilitating, not showing, neutrality and being biased. And that's something that a lot of times they contribute by jumping in and imposing maybe certain things or ideas.
And it's really difficult. It's really difficult to stay neutral, but you have to be objective. So as a facilitator, you're supposed to just facilitate the team learning and facilitate the team decision making and facilitate the communications and the discussion, so that nobody leaves the retrospective feeling really bad about it, and so that everybody leaves the retrospective feeling that they got something out of it. Now, sometimes as a facilitator, if the team is discussing a problem and if only they did this, it would be so much better, you have to try to hold yourself back. And perhaps you can ask them if they want a suggestion, but you should first and foremost try to hold yourself back. And the reason being that if you're the one telling them what to do, then perhaps the motivation for doing it will not be as high if it was something they come up with themselves. And I realized that the Toyota Kata that some people may have heard about is something where it's a bit like a retrospective, but it's more controlled, in the sense that somebody perhaps together with the team, perhaps just choosing for the team, chooses somewhere that they should be. This is like the star. This is what we want to achieve. And then the Toyota Kata is, okay, so where are we? Are we here? Are we here? Are we here? And then we find the smallest action that can get us towards this without thinking that we'll ever reach this, but what are the small actions? And some people prefer the Toyota Kata, where you can be more hands-on with helping them to say, this is where you should go. But I think it's two different things, right? I think a retrospective should truly be where you as a facilitator are neutral, and the team should figure out what they should talk about, what they should learn, and what they should do. If you want something else, call it something else.
Yeah, or just be aware, right? Like in the sense, a lot of times the lack of awareness or understanding of this neutrality. So like if you're stepping in, you can say, hey guys, I'm putting on my non-facilitator hat, right?
Yeah.
And just be aware that you're doing that versus just unknowingly, imposing things or showing your bias.
Yeah, I agree. That's also why I said, sometimes you can ask them if they want input, right? Because if they don't know how to do this, you can say, well, do you want to hear what other people have tried? But as you say, it should be a conscious decision instead of trying to manipulate them into something.
Exactly. Could you talk about your Wheel of Fortune anti-pattern? What's that one about?
Yeah, so the Wheel of Fortune anti-pattern is, you should think about being in a Tivoli or a fair, and there's this Wheel of Fortune, and the game master turns the Wheel of Fortune, and if it hits these three numbers, you won, and if it hits any of the others, you've lost, right? But if you hit the one where you won, you can choose a little teddy bear or some candy or something like that, and all the others, you just lost your money. So that's why it's called a Wheel of Fortune.
Hit or miss.
Yes, mostly miss.
Right.
So in a retrospective, sometimes people feel, well, we don't have a lot of time for this because coding is what we should really do. That's the real work. So let's just rush through the retrospective as fast as possible, right? So they say, well, the quickest thing is to just put up 3 posters and say, what should we start doing? What should we stop doing? What should we continue doing? And then the team members, they write these post-it notes and they put them up on what should we start, what should we stop, what should we continue doing. And then sometimes you see something like, well, on the start, we should definitely start having pair programming, and on the stop is we should have less meetings or something like that. And then if you really want to rush the retrospective, then you'll just say, okay, if we need to have more pair programming, we'll just make the action point is we'll make a schedule. Well, you have pair programming 3 hours a day, 3 days a week, and that fixes it. And for the less meetings, we'll just cut away half of the meetings and then we'll be fine. And then everybody leaves the retrospectives and they're happy, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is that sometimes these things that you see are only symptoms of problems. They're not the actual problems. So if you solve the symptoms, the problem is still there. So for instance, in the pair programming one, if the problem really was that people forgot to do pair programming, then surely a schedule would work. A schedule would solve the problem. Mm-hmm. But if the lack of pair programming is a symptom of something else, for instance, a symptom that there's a lack of trust in the team, as we talked about before, people feel uneasy having other people looking at them when they code, then scheduling the pair programming doesn't really change anything, right? It just,
exactly.
Yeah, it's just,
you might
like,
even just add more attention to it because
it would be even worse. Yeah. And with the less meetings, if you just cut away some of the meetings, you're saying, oh, we can easily solve this. And perhaps it's not the quantity of the meetings, but the quality of the meetings. Maybe it's just a symptom that the meetings are bad, they're badly led, there's not a good agenda, the wrong people are being invited, things like that. So maybe you should think about these things before you jump to conclusions. So the Wheel of Fortune is where you go directly from the gathering data to deciding what to do, instead of having that really important part in between, which is generating insights about the data.
The groan zone. I know you talk about the
groan zone.
divergent and convergent, and it's that groan zone, right, that you're talking about, and being,
Yeah, that you need to have this grown zone open where you can talk about why did this happen, what is causing this, could this happen again, how often does it happen, all these things you have to look at before you start running into action and solving things. But often I see, and actually today, just a few hours ago, facilitating a retrospective with developers, I'm asking them to gather data about things that went wrong, and they write the solutions directly. Like they don't even mention the problem. They just, we should start doing this. And like, why should we start doing this? So we have to start with why, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's probably the anti-pattern of anti-patterns, in the sense of just like it's the mindset, right, of relentless improvement and understanding what goes into relentless improvement. It's not just, oh yeah, this is it, let's jump into it.
Yeah.
But like you said, it's like really understanding the why and being able to spend at least some time exploring that area rather than just jumping to conclusion, and then having a team commitment to fixing these things and exploring these things. I think that's if I reflect back and facilitating retrospectives, or just in general, at least in my opinion, that's the mother of all anti-patterns when it comes to retrospective.
Definitely. Yeah. Just jumping to conclusions, and it's so easy to do.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Well,
that's
it's
the way
also we live in an environment where like we don't have time. We just keep moving, do it fast, and sometimes, I joke around, but it's almost like marinating things. Sometimes it's good to marinate on things and let it sit and discuss it, because something much better comes out of it.
Yeah, and I often see that where we're in the retrospective, and people start talking about one of the incidents, and they want to end the conversation, and I start saying, well, what caused this? And they say, well, this and that, but what else could have caused this? I mean, you could do the fishbone diagram to find that out, but you can also just ask questions. And I can feel in the beginning that they, why is she stopping us? Because we're so close to the conclusion, we're so close to the solution, right? And I'm trying to still, okay, so but what, why are we here? What happened? How did we end here, right? And then they reach a point at some point where it's like, oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, it was actually because we hadn't talked about that before, or we didn't know who was responsible for that. Or, oh, we were both responsible for that, but I thought you did it, and things like that. So, as you say, it's a marinating things, but brains are slow sometimes, and it takes time to go back to that reflection state where you can actually really understand why things had happened, because you're so focused on the solution always.
It is, but like, especially developers should know that, right? As a developer, you know that it's rare that you can just sit down and just solve a problem, right? Unless you're in a state of flow, right? Usually you're thinking about it when you're riding, walking, it marinates in your head as far as how you're gonna, solve this problem. So it's similar, like, the problems that we're talking about in retrospectives are just different types of problems, but they're still problems. So
Yeah,
that should be familiar to the people that are solving problems.
I think you're putting the finger on the point there, because it's a different kind of problems.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the developers, they appreciate that programming is hard and it takes time to figure that out. It's only in the shower, or as you say, in the long walk, that suddenly it occurs to you, or maybe in your dreams. But I think that one of the things that I'm trying to make them understand is that all problems are actually hard. Also, just people problems, like soft problems, are actually also really hard. Problems about how to communicate, how to give feedback, how to trust each other, it's really hard. And it takes a while to think about it and to reflect in order to find the right solution.
How is this related to do-it-yourself anti-pattern?
Yeah, so do-it-yourself anti-pattern is a pattern that sort of explains the anti-pattern solution is that it's always the same person who is facilitating the retrospective. And in Scrum, it's often the Scrum Master who is the one facilitating the retrospective every time. And the problem is that when you are a facilitator, you're really busy. Like you have a schedule and you've written down maybe some points about things that it would be nice to touch upon. So maybe you can ask these questions, and you have to look at people's body language. And it's even harder now when it's online because you can only see the face and sometimes the hands. So if
you're lucky. I don't know what, sometimes it's difficult to get even people to turn on their cameras.
I got some issues about that. I can come back to that later because I agree. That's different. Yeah, that's actually a different anti-pattern, like called peekaboo. But the do-it-yourself is that if you are doing the retrospectives facilitation yourself every time for your team, then either you can choose to be the facilitator and then you don't really get a retrospective as a team member, or you can choose to also be a team member, but then you're not as good a facilitator, because a facilitator is really a hard job that you have to really focus on everything people write, everything they say, every little movement, and the agenda, the time. You have to make sure that you go through all the important stuff and that you come up with action points at the end instead of dragging it on half an hour later. So do it yourself is try to not always have the same person facilitating, or at least not having the same person from the same team facilitating, because if you're in a team, you'd like to be in the retrospective yourself. So maybe you can swap with another team and you can help facilitating each other's, or within the organization, or you can have an external facilitator. But the thing you said about the video is really important as well, because a lot of people are not on video. And then, so in the beginning of COVID, it became really, really important for me to have people being on video, because all the retrospectives were online. Previously, perhaps half of the retrospectives I facilitated were online, but the people who were online then, they knew how to work remotely, and they knew it was important to be on video. But now everybody had to do that. And a lot of people didn't want to do that. And I want to just say, let's just force everybody to be on video. But then I heard the backlash of people saying, you can't force people to be on video. Maybe it's psychologically unsafe to them to be on video. And I say, okay, I appreciate that. To some people, very few, it feels very bad for them to be on video. But I think, again, like in the Wheel of Fortune, we have to think about what's the difference between the symptoms and the problems, right? The symptom that we see is that they're not on video. What's the problem? Let's find out what the problem is before we start solving the symptom. I mean, you can do all sorts of things with the symptom. You can enforce that they're on video, or you can say, let's have a game in the beginning where everybody shows something red from the office, or find something blue or something like that. And that makes them turn on the video, and then it's easier to have the video turned on. But if they continue to not be on video, then I think you have to figure out what is the problem behind this. And then for the people that I've asked, I've had different excuses or like presentations of what the problem is. Some people say, oh, I don't have a webcam. I mean, that's easily fixed if that's actually the problem.
Exactly.
We can very easily buy you a cheap webcam, which will be sufficient for being in a retrospective. But then if you tell them that, they'll say, oh, it's okay, I'm fine with this because I'm actually taking the meeting from a car. And you're like, okay, so the lack of video is a symptom of a problem, that is that you don't take this retrospective really seriously. Because if you take a retrospective seriously, you don't do it from the car. Because a retrospective is a time that you set aside to really learn about your other team members. And you're probably having some sort of shared document online that you're supposed to be able to write into and look at. And you can't do that while you're driving a car. And you also can't look at the other people in the team while you're saying something and see their reaction while you're driving a car. So if that's the problem, then that's just a symptom that the problem is they're not taking it seriously enough. And also when they say, it's because I'm in a cafe, I'm taking it from a cafe. Okay, well, then that's another problem. You're not taking it
Yeah, I mean,
seriously.
like change the time maybe or something like that. A
Yeah,
lot of times people are in different time zones. It's too
yeah,
early for me. I don't want to wake up my, so I'm just listening and turning off my camera,
yeah,
maybe because it's dark and I don't look good under
yeah,
under the light, whatever it is, right? So it's just, yeah, I agree with that. Like it's just, finding the underlying reason, or maybe it's just that, it's a new team and whatever it is. I don't like how I look in the morning, and
mm,
it's vulnerable from that standpoint.
exactly.
Um,
But fair enough, then we'll deal with that.
mhm. um, what about? I saw your talk on important. I think it's maybe a couple of years. Importance of laughter. I wanted to talk to you about that, and
Yeah.
could you elaborate on that idea of importance of laughter?
Yeah. So I always try when I'm facilitating a retrospective or in a meeting actually to make people laugh for several reasons. It just makes you feel good when you're laughing, and feeling good is always a good start of a meeting. But also, if there's any tension in the meeting, which there often is in the retrospective, then laughter is a very good tension release. So if everybody
Mhm.
laughs, then we can start talking about things. But also, if you're asking a question and it's completely quiet and nobody knows what to say, it's probably because their brains are just a bit stuck from the tension. But if you can make
Mhm.
people laugh, then it relaxes them, and it allows their brains to think about it while they're laughing, and then probably they can come up with something. But it's also because it's, in my experience, the team that laughs together is a good team. I'm not
Mhm.
thinking about if they laugh at one of the people in the team, of course, but if they laugh together,
Yeah.
it's a very good way of gelling the team members together. So I think that, among other things, there's a lot of importance in laughter. And if you're not funny as a person, you can find some funny cartoon and show, or a funny video clip and show. It doesn't matter. You can just steal and rob and lend. You don't have to be
Mhm.
funny to make people laugh. And I think it's really important for everybody to do that.
Yeah, I mean, it's and if you reflect on any team that you've been on that you really liked, that you like, this definitely felt like a team. Definitely a lot of laughter, a lot of jokes on your expense, jokes on other people's expense, and I think
Yeah.
that's part of that trust, right? Like if
Yeah.
we laugh together, the in some ways we're developing that trust, or we have that trust, right? Um, yeah.
And I don't mind playing the clown a bit as a facilitator. I don't mind
Yeah.
doing something stupid. It's easier when it's in real life because I'm really stupidly clumsy. So I always fall of something or not something. So, and then we can laugh about that. And then when I've been silly, everybody else can be silly. So it also takes a bit of the seriousness away. And I think actually we take ourselves too seriously. Why do we have to be so adult and serious in order to be important? Why can't we
Yeah.
be childish and have fun? I would like that.
Yeah, it's a good question, in a sense. Like, I think all of us have that child in them that
Mhm.
wants to have fun, that wants to laugh, but uh, I don't know if it's conditioning over the years that like you're serious at work, it's all business, that the expectation and part of the culture
Yeah,
and
it
how
is.
we behave becomes a norm.
It does. And I mean, think about it, Miljan. When was the last time you laughed so hard that your stomach hurt?
Yeah, I don't know.
But you remember that feeling, don't you?
Yeah. Yeah, I can. It's a good question, and that's a really, I don't know. Usually, it's I can think of a couple of times. It's usually on my own expense too, with other people that I trust, so,
Yeah, exactly.
uh, or something in common that we have. But yeah, that's a good litmus test against, you know, uh, just how
Yeah, I
much
don't
fun
know.
you're
If it's
having.
a good team, it should hurt. I'm not sure that's the litmus test, but just thinking about it,
Yeah.
have you laughed today? It's
Hmm.
good.
Yeah, yeah, and it's I don't know. It's I don't have any meetings after this, and it's like it's setting me in the right mood. On the East Coast here, it's still morning, so there's something to be said about just the mood that it puts you in, and it's not just short term, but it might be like if we're laughing and having good time as a team, we might be even more productive, right?
Yeah, and you could start by laughing at something silly, and then you laugh, and then the smile lingers on your face after the laugh, and that smile sort of sends signals back to your brain that you're happy, and okay, well, I'm happy apparently, and then you become happy and more optimistic, and if you're happy and optimistic, you are more resilient to problems, so you work better. So actually, the bottom line in every organization is improved if people laugh every day.